10 things you should stop saying. Stop right there. The next sentence you say about yourself is either building your future or quietly burying it. There's no neutral. Words don't sit still. And most people are walking around every single day repeating phrases that are keeping them exactly where they are. I'm about to name 10 of them. One of them you've said this week. If you're brave enough to hear the truth about your own mouth, stay right here. Let's start with something most people move through life never truly understanding. The words you speak are not just sounds that disappear the moment they leave your mouth. They are seeds. Every sentence you release into the world, and especially every sentence you release about yourself, lands somewhere and begins to grow. There is no such thing as a neutral word. Language doesn't sit still once it's spoken. It either builds something or it erodes something. And most people go through their entire lives never realizing which one they're doing. Sentence after sentence, day after day. Think about how a farmer approaches a field. A farmer doesn't scatter seeds carelessly and hope for the best. A farmer understands that whatever goes into the ground eventually comes up out of the ground. Transformed, but recognizable. Corn from corn, wheat from wheat. Nothing planted produces something unrelated to itself. And yet, most people treat their own words with far less care than a farmer treats a handful of seeds. They speak whatever comes to mind, whatever feels easiest in the moment, whatever requires the least effort or courage, never stopping to consider that these words are not just passing thoughts. They are being planted, right now, into the soil of a life that will eventually produce a harvest matching exactly what was sown. This is why the phrase, "I don't have time," is not a harmless observation about your schedule. It is a seed. Say it enough times, and it stops being a description of your calendar and starts becoming a belief about your capacity. A belief that convinces you, deep down, that busyness is simply your permanent condition, and that priorities are things that happen to other people with more available hours than you have. This is why "that's just how I am" is not a statement of self-acceptance. It is a seed of permanence, planted directly into the part of your mind responsible for growth and change. Say it often enough, and you don't just describe your current patterns, you cement them. You turn a temporary habit into a fixed identity, and then you wonder, years later, why nothing about you ever seemed to shift. Understand what's actually happening when you speak carelessly about yourself. You are not simply venting. You are not simply being honest about a rough day. You are giving instructions to the deepest, most obedient part of your own mind. The part that doesn't question the words you feed it. The part that simply takes what you say and begins working to make it true. Say, "Nothing ever works out for me," enough times, and that part of your mind will start filtering out the evidence that contradicts you. It will begin ignoring the opportunities, the openings, the small strokes of good fortune that don't fit the story you've been repeating. Not because they don't exist, but because you've trained your own awareness to overlook them. This is the part that should stop you in your tracks. Careless words don't just describe a careless life. They actively construct one. Every time you casually declare a limitation over yourself, you are not simply commenting on your circumstances. You are planting a seed of that exact limitation into the fertile, obedient soil of your own subconscious mind. And that soil does not discriminate. It does not ask whether the seed you're planting is good for you or bad for you. It simply receives what you give it, and it grows. So before you dismiss this as some abstract idea about the power of positive thinking, understand what's actually being said here. This isn't about pretending everything is fine when it isn't. This isn't about forcing false optimism onto real struggles. This is about recognizing that your words are tools of construction, whether you intend them to be or not. Every sentence you speak about your life, your abilities, your future, your worth, is either laying a brick towards something greater or chipping away at a foundation you'll need later. There is no such thing as a sentence that does nothing. Speak carelessly for long enough, and you will live inside the careless life those words were quietly building the entire time. Let's talk about something that happens inside you every single day, whether you notice it or not. A quiet election, held over and over with only one voter, you. Every time you speak to yourself or about yourself, you are casting a vote for the person you are choosing to become. Most people have no idea this election is even taking place. They think they're just talking. They think they're just venting, just describing, just being honest about how they feel in the moment. But underneath all of that casual language, something far more consequential is happening. You are voting again and again for an identity. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people are voting against themselves dozens of times a day, and then wondering, with genuine confusion, why their life never seems to change. Consider how this plays out in the smallest moments. You make a mistake, and instead of simply correcting it, you say, "I'm so stupid." That's not an observation. hesitation, that's a vote. You miss an opportunity, and instead of simply noting the missed timing, you say, "Of course this happened to me. Nothing ever goes my way." That's not a complaint, that's a vote. You look in the mirror on a hard day and say, "I'll never get this together." That's not venting, that's a ballot cast, quietly, directly, against your own future. Here's what makes this so dangerous. No one else needs to believe these things about you for them to take hold. You don't need an enemy. You don't need a critic. You are fully capable of building your own limitations, brick by brick, sentence by sentence, entirely by yourself, using nothing but your own voice. The most convincing critic you will ever face in your life is not someone else. It's you, when you're tired, when you're disappointed, when you're speaking without thinking about what you're actually building with your words. And this self-talk doesn't stay contained to the moment it's spoken. It accumulates. Think of it like a ballot box that never closes. Every self-critical sentence, every careless "I can't," every offhand "I'm just not that kind of person." It all gets deposited into the same box, counted toward the same outcome. And eventually, after enough votes have been cast in the same direction, the election is decided. Not by fate, not by circumstance, by repetition. You become the majority opinion you've been voting for all along. This is why two people can face the exact same setback and walk away with completely different trajectories. It's rarely about the setback itself. It's about the internal vote each person casts in response to it. One person says, "This is proof I'm not cut out for this," and that vote pushes them toward giving up. Another person says, "This is information, not identity," and that vote pushes them toward adjusting and continuing. Same event, two different elections, two entirely different futures, decided in the space of a single sentence. Here's what I need you to sit with. You cannot outperform the vote you keep casting against yourself. It doesn't matter how much talent you have. It doesn't matter how much opportunity crosses your path. If your internal dialogue keeps voting for smallness, for doubt, for "I'm not the type of person who succeeds at this," those votes will eventually outweigh even the best circumstances life hands you. Talent can open a door, but self-talk decides whether you believe you're allowed to walk through it. So starting today, listen to your own voice the way you'd listen to a stranger giving advice to someone you love. If a stranger spoke to your child, your best friend, your future self, the way you sometimes speak to yourself, you'd stop them immediately. You wouldn't tolerate it for a second. Hold your own voice to that same standard, because every word you speak about yourself is not a passing comment, it's a vote. And it's time you started voting like you actually want to win. Let's talk about something most people never examine closely enough. The excuses they've been repeating for so long that they no longer sound like excuses at all. They sound like facts. They sound like personality. They sound like simple, honest descriptions of reality. But most of them are none of those things. Most of them are well-rehearsed lies, polished by repetition until they became indistinguishable from truth. Here's how it happens. The first time you say, "I don't have time," it's usually a genuine reaction to a busy moment. But say it enough times, in enough situations, and something shifts. It stops being a response to circumstances and starts becoming a script. A script so well rehearsed that you don't even have to think about it anymore. Someone brings up an opportunity, and before you've even considered whether you actually want it, the line is already out of your mouth. "I don't have time." Not because you evaluated your schedule, not because you thought it through, because the excuse has been rehearsed so many times, it now fires automatically, like a reflex, protecting you from having to make a harder decision. This is the real danger of excuses. They are not lazy statements made in a single weak moment. They are rehearsed performances, refined over years, delivered so smoothly that even you believe them. "That's just how I am" has been said so many times that it now feels like an unchangeable fact of your identity. When really, it started as a single moment of avoiding responsibility that simply never got questioned. "I'll start Monday" has been rehearsed every week for years, each time sounding just as convincing as the last, even though Monday rarely, if ever, becomes the day anything actually changes. What makes an excuse dangerous isn't that it's said once, it's that it's rehearsed until it becomes comfortable. And comfort is what makes a lie feel like truth. The first time you tell yourself you're not disciplined enough, it might feel like an honest confession, but by the 100th time, it's no longer honesty, it's identity. It's become the story you tell to avoid the discomfort of trying and possibly failing, or trying and possibly succeeding and having to face the responsibility that comes with that success. Here's something worth sitting with. Excuses are almost always more comfortable than the truth. The truth requires accountability. The truth says, I haven't made this a priority, or I'm afraid this won't work, or I don't yet know how to do this, and that scares me. Excuses, on the other hand, ask nothing of you. They hand you a socially acceptable explanation, one that sounds responsible, one that nobody questions, one that lets you off the hook without ever confronting the real reason underneath. That's precisely why they're so easy to keep repeating. They cost nothing in the moment, but they quietly charge interest over time, compounding year after year until the gap between where you are and where you could have been becomes difficult to even look at honestly. The problem with rehearsing a lie is that rehearsal makes anything sound convincing, regardless of whether it's true. Actors rehearse lines that were never their own words, and audiences believe them completely because rehearsal creates believability, not accuracy. This is exactly what happens when you repeat an excuse for years. It's not convincing because it's true. It's convincing because you've said it so many times that conviction and truth have become indistinguishable in your own mind. So here's the discipline required. The next time an excuse rises to your lips, pause before you let it out, rehearsed and automatic. Ask yourself, is this actually true, or is this simply well rehearsed? Is this a fact about my circumstances, or a script I've repeated so many times that I stopped questioning it? Because the moment you start interrupting the rehearsal, you take back the power the excuse had been quietly holding over you, and you finally get the chance to tell yourself the truth, even if the truth is far less comfortable than the story you'd grown so used to performing. There's a truth that most people overlook completely because it doesn't announce itself the way circumstances do. Circumstances are loud. A layoff is loud. A financial setback is loud. A failed relationship is loud. These things demand your attention, and so people naturally assume that circumstances are what shape a life. But long before circumstances ever arrive, something quieter has already been setting the boundaries of what's possible. And that something is language. The words you consistently speak over your own life build a ceiling, and that ceiling is usually in place long before any external situation ever tests it. Think about this carefully. Two people can face the exact same opportunity, the same job opening, the same business idea, the same chance to start over, and walk away with completely different outcomes. It's tempting to credit this to talent or luck or timing, but often the real difference was decided earlier, in the quiet, repeated language each person had been using about themselves for years before that opportunity ever showed up. One person had been saying, for years, I'm the kind of person who figures things out. The other had been saying, for years, I'm the kind of person things don't work out for. When the same opportunity landed in front of both of them, it didn't land in neutral territory. It landed inside two very different ceilings, built entirely out of language, long before the opportunity itself ever arrived. This is why you will never consistently outperform the words you speak over your own life. It's not because language is magic. It's because language shapes behavior, and behavior shapes outcomes. And this chain reaction happens so gradually that most people never trace their results back to the sentences that quietly built them. If you spend years saying, I'm bad with money, you don't just describe a pattern, you excuse yourself from learning the skills that would change that pattern. Because why would you invest effort into becoming something you've already declared yourself incapable of being? The ceiling isn't imposed by your bank account. It's imposed by the sentence you keep repeating about your relationship with money, long before your bank account ever gets the chance to reflect anything different. This is also why simply changing your circumstances rarely changes your life the way people expect it to. Give someone a new job, a new city, a new relationship, a new opportunity, but leave their internal language exactly the same and watch what happens. The same patterns resurface, wearing different clothes. The ceiling didn't move just because the scenery changed. Ceilings aren't built by circumstances. They're built by repeated language. And repeated language doesn't disappear just because the environment around it does. It follows you into the new job, into the new city, into the new relationship, quietly recreating the same limitations in a different setting. This is why changing your vocabulary is not some soft, cosmetic exercise. It is structural work. When you stop saying, I'll never be good at this, and start saying, I haven't mastered this yet, you're not just softening the tone of your language, you're literally rebuilding the ceiling. You're expanding the space your mind believes is available to you. It won't feel dramatic at first. Nothing about changing a sentence feels like it should change a trajectory. But trajectories are rarely changed by dramatic, single moments. They're changed by small, repeated shifts, compounding quietly over time. The the same way the original limiting language compounded quietly over years to build the ceiling in the first place. So understand this clearly. Before you blame your circumstances for how far you've been able to go, examine your vocabulary first. Examine the sentences you've repeated so often they've become invisible to you, the ones you no longer even notice yourself saying. Because in almost every case, the real ceiling was never the situation you were dealt. It was the language you used to describe it, spoken so many times in so many quiet moments that it eventually became the very boundary of what you believed you were allowed to become. If you've caught yourself saying even one of these this week, don't feel shame, feel awareness. If your own words have been quietly writing a smaller story than the one you deserve, comment "rewrite" below right now so I know you're ready to change your language. Because the next 3 phrases are the ones that hurt the deepest and heal the fastest once you drop them.